Hello, John. How are we doing?
Hi, good afternoon. Very well.
You okay?
I'm good, yes.
Awesome. I'm going to get straight into this because I'm very, very excited to have you on. So, you're the managing editor of BBC Radio Lancashire, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So have you always been in radio? Have you branched out in print, television, or anything like that?
No, radio through and through. So I did, did 10 years in the commercial sector.
Okay.
And then I moved over to the BBC, and I've been with the BBC for a very long time. So I went into radio straight after university.
Okay, cool. So so you've obviously been in the industry for a long time. I think everyone asks you what the best job is, but I wanted to ask you what's the worst job you've had in the media industry, if there is one.
The worst job?
Yeah.
I've been really lucky. I've had some great jobs. I mean, some people would maybe my first job. I can tell my first job was I was a technical operator and nighttime presenter at Piccadilly Radio in Manchester.
Okay.
So that was from 1980 through to 90. I did various jobs, but I started out doing that. And whilst it would be a great opportunity these days to be on the radio in the middle of the night, but that's how you kind of started.
Yeah.
But the worst part about it was that they had, in those days, we had this thing called non-needle time, so that you couldn't just play any music that you wanted or from the playlist. The record companies at the time had believed that the growth of radio would stop people buying records. So they put a limit on the amount of music that radio stations could play, which is why it's called needle time. We're going back to the days when you put a stylus on a disc. And so they limited the amount you could have to, I think it was 9 hours a day of music. So by the time you got to 2 a.m., there was none left. So yeah, and we had this whole library of non-needle time music, which was generally pretty dreadful. So you had 4 hours of sort of orchestral arrangements of terrible things, and we had some live musicians who were great. But yeah, I got to play four, I think, was it two or four, as it were, contemporary songs in 4 hours.
Wow.
So I saved them up to the end. So it was great fun, great learning experience. But that you envied the guys in daytime who could just play whatever they wanted.
Yeah, isn't that known as like the graveyard shift?
Yeah, it was the graveyard shift. Yeah, there was some real characters who used to inhabit the airwaves at 2 a.m. Of course, there wasn't much in the way of entertainment going on in the 80s at 2 a.m. Piccadilly was one of the first 24-hour radio stations. Those were the days when the telly used to go off at just after midnight, and they played the national anthem, and everyone stood up and saluted and went to bed. So 24-hour, these days we've got a million channels, telly and all that sort of thing. But there wasn't anything like that, remotely like that then. So being a 24-hour radio station, so it was a graveyard, but it was quite a busy graveyard.
Yeah. And haven't you met Mick Jagger? Is that correct?
Yeah. When I then gravitated towards being a producer, which is the best job. I used to produce Mike Sweeney's show. And Mike, still on the radio in Manchester in the mornings. And we got an invitation to go to Paris to interview Mick Jagger. So we said, yeah, go on then. And we went. It was one of those crazy trips. We flew to, in the days when record companies had oodles of money coming out their ears, they thought nothing of flying journos over to Paris, put us up in Swiss Hotel, get to interview Mick for 10 minutes. That was the plan, and then go out for dinner with him. And in the end, it was kind of funny because I don't know if you know Mike Sweeney, but he's a proper character. He's a good mate, very soul-forward and down to earth. And I'm absolutely certain it was the case that we're sitting there in this basement of CBS Studios in Paris, waiting for the great Mick Jagger to walk in. And in he flounces and sits down, and Mike says, "Right, oh, great, kid. Lovely to see you. I thought we'd start off by talking about all those drugs you used to take in the 60s, which was not the beginning that I'd planned. But anyway, they got on famously, and they just chatted and chatted and chatted. The 10-minute slot went out the window. I think in the end, I walked away with sort of 50 minutes of recording of Mick Jagger. So he was a proper gent as well, and he let us take his picture and all that sort of stuff. So that was good. And then I think we felt really chuffed because the next guy in got 5 minutes.
That's incredible, though. Imagine meeting just someone like that. That'd be amazing.
Well, to be honest with you, in those days, the artists came to the radio station a lot, and they courted the radio stations because radio play was so important. And there were only 30 odd stations in the UK at the time, not like the hundreds and thousands there are. So I think of the people, loads of people Piccadilly was sort of star city. Anyone coming to Manchester would be interviewed on Piccadilly, and they'd come in. So I remember a very young Bryan Adams coming in as a brand new artist.
Wow.
And we thought he'd probably do all right. My favourite one, though, was my friend Pete Baker, who used to do the breakfast show. He was absolutely obsessed with Gary Newman.
Okay.
Of Tubeway Army. And so he was offered an opportunity to interview Gary Newman, who was in the Britannia Hotel, which is, if you remember, for those of people who know Manchester, Piccadilly Radio was situated in underneath the Piccadilly Hotel, overlooking Piccadilly Gardens, and the Britannia Hotel is literally across the street. And he put in, could we please interview Gary Newman? And they said, well, you'll have to pick him up from the hotel. Now, because of the one-way system, it was so much quicker to walk. So, and they said, we don't do that. People come here, they want some limo or something. So Pete was he said, I'll pick him up. Shot round there in his Ford Escort. Gary Newman took one look at this car and said, I'm not going in that, and then walked across the road. So, yeah, showbiz, superstars.
That's showbiz. So I don't know if you can answer this question, but what would a typical day be like as a managing editor of a local BBC radio station? Does it change?
Well, it's very strange at the moment, I'll give you that. I seem to spend most of my time making signs and putting them up around the building saying, walk once, it's one way only. So it is every day is different, as they say. There's obviously some things that come around very frequently, but it's really about facilitating people to do the job, which is reflecting for us Lancashire and being a source of news, information, entertainment. So every day, obviously, we have our morning meeting where we check in with each other and work out what stories we want to pursue and who's going to do them and how they're going to appear on the radio. A lot of it is about just making sure everyone's all right. There's a lot of that sort of pastoral care, if you like, of being the managing editor and protecting the staff from, if I'm being honest, from some of the bureaucratic nonsense. That's because that goes with it, with the territory, I suppose.
I guess, yes. You have to wear like different hats day to day.
Yeah, if you think about it, it's because we're an island site, as they call it. So some radio stations are in these big city hubs, like say Media City is the home to 5 Live, BBC Breakfast, and Radio Manchester. So all the boring stuff, what you might call the bogs and boilers stuff, that's looked after by someone else. A site like ours in the middle of Blackburn, Radio Lancashire, there's just us.
Right.
And so there's also all that side of things, if someone's smashed a bottle in the car park, or if there's an issue in reception, those sort of things that my colleagues at the big city one probably don't have to worry about, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
but we it's part of it.
Yeah, so I guess it's just looking at different aspects of the station. And don't you? So I've done a bit of research on you, and don't you play an instrument? And are you in a band or?
Yeah, well, yes, I am in a band. I've played in bands most of my life. So I play the guitar.
Right. Okay.
And yeah, well, like every band at the moment, we're on hiatus because although when they say about social distancing, many of our gigs would be fine for social distancing, you know. But yeah, it's tricky at the moment for bands because you see all these people who are doing stuff on Zoom
Yeah.
and getting together like that, and you start to wonder whether we'll come, when is the day going to come up when we're going to be able to get the guitars and the amps out and stand on a stage and play to a room full of people, which is something I have done for most of my life. I started playing the guitar when I was 11, and you always join a band.
Yeah.
Bands are great. Everyone should join a band.
I can play the triangle or the tambourine.
Well, listen, when I played in a band called Bobsleigh and the Cresters, and we had someone who played the toys.
The toys?
Yeah, I just played, had like a plastic trumpet, and we had a guy, actually, this was a band with Mark Radcliffe, you know, of Six Music. He's a good pal who used to work at Piccadilly Radio, and he's always been in bands. And he had this band called Bobsleigh and the Cresters, which was just a crazy conglomeration of people. I think often there were more of us on stage than there were in the audience, but we just used to have a laugh. And one guy did sit at the front of the stage and read the newspaper.
Really?
He was in the band. And this other guy had this collection of plastic toys that he used to play along.
So what you're saying is there is hope for me yet to be a rock star.
Yeah. I think the triangle is quite advanced.
So talking about advice, what advice would you give somebody who is starting out in the industry? Is there any like sort of tips and tricks you would say to them?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've got lots of advice. I hope. Be realistic. I think most of the time people got to ask yourself, why do you want to do this? What is it about radio? I mean, I was a massive radio fan, so I listened to radio as a kid, and yeah, I got bitten by the radio bug. If you want to be famous, and that's it, then probably don't bother getting in a radio, because most people who work on the radio are not famous. If you want to be rich, probably don't bother either, because the number of people who actually become rich from working on the radio, again, limited. But you've got to have a passion. You've got to be interested in people, and you've got to be inquisitive, I think. Radio is the brilliant, intimate medium, but it's all about your listener. It's all about the guests. It's not about you. Yeah. So you've got to fit the bill, in my opinion. You've got to think about what's your motivation. And then let's assume, so you're really passionate about radio and you're very aware. So then the next thing is, if you start to think about getting a foot in the door, make sure you use that opportunity wisely. So a lot of people come to us through, say, work experience. And I think making the most of that work experience, make sure you've got a plan, make sure you've discussed it with the managing editor or whoever's looking after you, that if you're there for 2 weeks, that 2 weeks has got to be really productive for you. You're not going to get a job from straight at the end of that, but you are going to put on a marker, and you should always be able to come away from that work experience with something tangible, something you did on the radio. So that should be one of your objectives of your work experience. I want to do a piece, and you make sure that during the time of your work experience, you get that. And so, any placements, that should be your thing. But to get a good placement, also you've got to show that you know and care. So the number of people who actually come for real job interviews, and you say to them, so what do you think of the breakfast show? And so, well, I've never listened to it. It's like, well, see ya. You've got to know, it's bizarre, you've got to know more about our radio station than I do.
Yeah. I remember when because I met you, a year ago, 13 months ago?
Yeah.
And you pretty much said the same thing. You were like, why do you want to be?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. I mean, because quite clearly we live in a funny time, and some people undoubtedly want to be on the radio because they want to feed their ego, and that's not the best. That's not the best starting point, in my opinion.
Mm. Yeah, no, because so I remember meeting you, and then I did that a week's work experience with you guys.
Yep. Did you get on the radio?
I did actually, yeah.
There you go.
So I did a Vox Pops. They were talking about what was the subject? It was on the Breakfast Show with Graham Liver, and they were talking about people taking time off because their pets have died.
Right. Oh, good subject.
So I went out into Blackburn city centre and just started interviewing people. Yeah. And I was so nervous. I was unbelievably nervous. But yeah, I did that. And then I don't think anyone at the station knows this, but the first day I was at the station, I flew from LA a couple of days before.
Cool.
And I thought, so the first day for me would have been the Tuesday, and I thought I landed on the Sunday, I'll have Monday to recover, and then Tuesday I can go in raring for my first day at the BBC. But because of the time difference, I got it wrong, and I actually landed on the Monday.
Right, so you're jet lagged and walking around and asking people would they take time off if they can.
So the most of Tuesday, I was just trying to hold it together. Luckily, you invited me back, so I think I've done something right somewhere.
Yeah, well, that's we like to develop talent. That's all about developing talent and giving people opportunities.
Definitely,
and sometimes those opportunities are the opportunity to wander around Blackburn asking people about dead animals.
So where do you think the industry is heading at the moment? I'm talking about specifically the radio industry. So where do you think, because obviously it's in 2020 at the moment, radio is not just about radio. You have to have social media, you have to have videos, you have to have a presence. So do you think it's heading that way, or do you think it's going to take a different direction?
It's really hard at the moment to predict where our business is going. It's changed massively. It's changed massively in the last 2 or 3 years. And obviously, we've seen huge seismic changes within the commercial sector that have had a massive impact on jobs and turning into these huge sort of conglomerate stations. So we've lost a lot of the localness. And it's interesting to think where's that going, because clearly that is aimed at competing with our BBC networks, the Radio 1s and Radio 2s. And by getting the leverage from being able to present the advertiser with a huge audience, national audience, rather than the olden days when you were going knocking on the doors of Fred's bike shop to see if he wanted to advertise on, that sort of thing. That's the motivation behind it, clearly. And now we find ourselves in the middle of a pandemic where no one's spending any money on advertising. So it's going to be interesting to see how we come out of this. I think because that's changed everything. I feel. So, it's well known that BBC local radio was sort of in a position of slow but gradual decline, audience terms. And obviously questions were being asked and still are being asked. So where does it go? How do we put a stop to that? But since the pandemic, the evidence seems to be that BBC local radio is really coming to its own, because we've been a key provider of information and a sort of the community hub that the nationals have probably struggled to emulate. They've not been able to do that at all. So you feel that our star is momentarily in the ascendant, but that's one of the things about local radio. If you think about it, we're great in terms of crisis. So like when it snows, everybody tunes in to see if their school's shut, that sort of thing. When, we won a number of awards for our coverage when floods hit Lancashire, because, the place, Lancaster, was completely shut off and the power went off and everything. And being able to provide a service, which is, the public service, that's what we're there for. But there's not a massive future in just being there for the nasty things in life, is there? You want to, and that's why I'm kind of proud of what we've been doing at the moment, which is, giving people all the information they need about lockdowns and so on and so forth, but also providing an entertainment service, because we're now 12 weeks into this thing, and people have started to climb the walls. We know that, but they don't just want to hear non-stop, wall-to-wall coronavirus stuff.
Yeah, Mike has been doing the quiz, hasn't he, in the evenings?
The quiz has been one of the most popular things we've done for ages, and it's brilliant because, who'd have thought it? A basic quiz, and of course it's lovely because it's set in an imaginary pub.
Yeah, it's such a simple idea. Idea, but they work.
But as you'll have heard, people are joining in from all around the world. So people are competing against their mums and dads or their children who are in Australia and Canada. And we've had all people from all over the world, which is just kind of bizarre. Just sitting there doing a pub quiz of all things, and then ringing in or texting in or mailing saying, "Hey, I beat my dad." It's kind of lovely, and it is that community spirit, and it just shows you communities are so. Community is a very complex thing. Communities can be global.
Yeah, no, I think you've hit the nail on the head when you said the word community, because it is just not just. I know it's BBC Radio Lancashire and it is predominantly for Lancashire, but like you said, it's people from around the world just joining in because at the moment it is not a nice time and it is horrible and people are stuck stuck inside indoors, but it's just having that connection and that thing going, oh, I got that question right, or I got that question wrong. Yeah. And I think that's amazing to see and hear.
I'm waiting for Mike to inadvertently give you the answer. The answer in the question. He doesn't do that too often, but no, I know. I mean, I mentor, and one of my mentees just emailed me out the blue saying, "I'm listening to so much more of your radio station because I'm doing the quiz every night against my mum, and I cannot beat her." Which I thought was lovely.
It is amazing, yeah. Just before I do the quick fire question at the end, what has changed? You touched on it earlier, but what has changed for you specifically and BBC Radio Lancashire since the lockdown has started? Obviously, you were talking about you mostly putting up signs around the station.
Yeah, signs for what has really changed is there's so few people on station because one of the first things we did was send everybody home. Some people had to go home and they've been shielded and they've got health conditions, which mean that they are best off staying home and working from home. And of course, that is now, and not just within radio, but I think for a lot of people, the whole, hey, I can do this job from here.
Yeah,
and
working from home.
Some people are thriving on working from home, and some people absolutely hate it.
Yeah.
And the impact on the radio station is that there's just a handful of people there, and you miss the camaraderie, you miss the knocking ideas about with a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
You can do it. You can try and do it on Zoom, but as I've found in my weekly staff meetings on Zoom, that's really complicated. I've got a massive telly in my office, and I'm trying to look at everybody's face, and it's just not really working. I said, "Can you put your hand up if you want to speak?"
Yeah.
And I'm spending way too much time doing Zoom meetings, either in them with the management higher up from me, and there's that kind of. I think that we need a new word for Zoom silence. When someone says, "Okay, I hope you all understand that. Any questions?" And if you were in a room, you'd say, "Anybody got any questions?" Normally, some idiot speaks, but me. Or you can just see people nodding their heads and everything. Whereas on these Zoom meetings, it's just this tumbleweed moment. And then someone said, "Right, okay, I'll take your absolute silence as a sign that you all understood that." And you think, I hope so.
Yeah, because I think with because you're face to face, I think non-verbal communication is like what 70%, 80%, and if you're missing out on that in Zoom, then it's hard to gauge if people understand what you're saying or what you're doing. Well,
and I know it's not Zoom, but we had a really interesting conversation yesterday on our radio station with a lady who's actually in Italy. And they were comparing notes about lockdowns and so on and so forth. And this lady was saying that now, because they were really, really locked down in Italy in the last 2 weeks, they've been allowed to move more freely. But this whole thing about face masks, and so they all you have to wear face masks still. And she said that, so there's this whole thing about how do you interpret people?
Yeah.
When all you can see is their eyes.
Yeah.
And she'd gone out with a face mask and sunglasses, and wondering why everyone was being really off with her. And it's like, suddenly realised, no one can read you in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So now she's like, take sunglasses off, and next year her eyes are really nicely made up.
Because that's the only part you can see.
Yeah, all the women in Italy apparently going for really heavy mascara because so, very expressive eyes. So yeah, and that's to come for us, of course. Now it seems that we're going to be using more masked face coverings. So yeah, the non-verbal communication and all that stuff that you really miss. I think there's aspects of this that's brilliant. You know, when I think of the amount of time I and other colleagues spend on trains and driving up motorways to go for meetings that last an hour, and you think, you know, my next one person up from me is based in Leeds, so she has a meeting and I have to go to Leeds, and you'd think it'd be easy to get from Blackburn to Leeds and back.
Yeah.
It takes forever, and if your meeting is 2 hours, that's a day.
Yeah,
and
gone.
you hope that meeting was really, really, really productive, and as we all know, meetings sometimes aren't.
Yeah.
And so I think the idea that we can do it like this is great, but you do miss that face-to-face stuff. And certainly at Radio Lancashire at the moment, and on a typical day, there'll be 5 people in at the most. Now, you've been at Radio Lancashire. We used to be weekend evenings.
Yeah. No, I have a general rule that if a meeting doesn't have food, it can be done in an email. So that's
Well, no BBC meetings have food. Not anymore.
I've noticed, yeah.
After the Great Biscuit ban.
Right. So just to end quickly, I'm going to give you some quick questions. So it's about the past, present, and future. So the first one is, what advice would you give a 15-year-old John Clayton? What would you say to him?
I would say be brave, be ambitious, and realise there's a big world out there. You know, I am so old that we didn't really have, I don't think we had aspirations. I'll see kids these days and they're all really ambitious.
My mum said that as well, because I asked her that question. She was like, I just didn't think about it. And she said the same thing.
You know, people my age would tell you, oh yeah, I went for a careers chat. And they sort of said, I want to be on the stage. And I said, yeah, but you probably end up working down the pit, or you know, in the co-op. So, you know, I have no memory of as a kid. You know, I love football, but you know, I know kids these days dream of being Premier League footballers. I didn't do that. You know, it wasn't like, because it was just felt like that's another world and it's not for you.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that ever happened. I don't know why that was the case. But so I would certainly say to 50. I hesitate to think when I was 15. But you know, I mean, I can tell you a story. I was at school, and they'd said in the assembly, if you want to apply for Oxford, come and get these forms. And I went to Wigan Grammar School.
Right.
And it's like, Oxford? Who the hell goes to Oxford from here? You know, seriously.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I was walking at 2 or 3 hours later past the staff room, and our French teacher, who was known as Killer Taylor, I don't think he actually killed anybody, but he was always known as Killer Taylor. Killer Taylor appeared and said, "Hey, you," said, "why have you not asked for a form for Oxford?" I said, "Hey, really?" And so he said, "Yeah, you should do." And he gave me this form, and as it turns out, I ended up going to Oxford to read German. And
wow, I didn't know that.
I would never have, you know, it's like, what? I aspired to go to university, I think. That's to say, so I don't remember being ambitious, and I would say be ambitious, be brave. There's a world out there.
Yeah, I know, because I think like there's all the jobs. So like, if you want to be a Premiership footballer, someone's got to be a Premiership footballer. So why not you?
Why can it
Like,
not be you?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I want to like make it in the radio industry. So someone's got to do it. Why not? Why not me?
Well, like I said, I do a lot of mentoring and with school kids and with students. And the thing I find myself saying so many times, because people are tend to be so hesitant. You know, you say, I want to do this. So, well, have you written to them? Have you asked them? Can I come and see what you do in your business or whatever? And so, do you think I should? And so my mantra is, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
And I wish someone had said that to me. You know, what's the worst that could happen? Because and of course, the worst thing that can happen is they say no.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you're such a wallflower or such a shy retiring genius that someone saying no to you would make you retire to your bedroom for 6 months and paint all the walls black, then maybe it's not the right business for you, you know. But yeah, what's the worst that could happen is, if the worst that could happen is someone says no, you know, you're gonna get over that, aren't you?
Yeah, no, you do. Yeah, you got to keep pushing through, keep going through. Exactly. Yeah. So second question is, you have got the choice of 3 people. So any 3 people in the world, dead or alive, who would you have as a dinner guest and why? So
I've been discussing this with my family, and they agree with my choices. So first of all, Michelle Obama.
Oh, you're the 3rd person, I think, who I've spoken to who said her. She's a popular person.
Well, clearly, we've all just read her book. But,
yeah.
I've just read about, and of course, part of the thing is the stuff I keep coming back to, the mentoring. She's such a passionate advocate about mentoring. And here's a weird thing, you know, you sort of read a book and you think, there is like, what have I got in common? What a lad from Wigan got in common with a black woman from south side of Chicago.
Yeah.
But so many of the common themes to go through there, that's an am I good enough? The imposter syndrome and all that sort of thing. And she ended up, you know, she's ended up as an icon. She was in the White House for, you know, alongside Barack Obama, obviously. But what she did when she was there was amazing, I thought. And it's just about giving people a vision, giving kids a vision of saying, you are not, there's nothing to stop you doing this. And I just love that sense of empowerment and the fact that she took all those people. I worry, though, because one of the things that runs through her book, and I've seen it when I've seen her on telly, is that she believes in hugging people. And how's that going to carry on now, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely have her. I think Jacinda Ardern, partly because I'm a big rugby league fan, Wigan Warriors. And so what I know of New Zealand is by and large rugby players,
right? Yeah, All Blacks,
Wigan, and the All Blacks and all that, and Lord of the Rings, which is filmed there. And so in my head, I got this idea: this is a very blokey place. You've got to be a bloke to survive in New Zealand. And she's coming out, and again, it's like I saw the other day. She was doing a speech, and they had an earthquake, and she was like.
Yeah, she was cool, calm and collected. Yeah.
But look at the situation. No, it's not just about the coronavirus, but today's the day. They're saying they're free.
Yeah, they said
And being able to run a country like that, I think she's really interesting character. So yeah, her, and then the third one is Eddie Izzard.
Oh wow! Okay, I wasn't expecting that.
Who I saw in. We got some tickets to see him at the Lowry Theatre in Salford, but it was kind of one of those where he was warming up for a tour.
Okay.
So he was testing material out.
So try and get a joke, yeah.
Really, really interesting. But I just love the idea that this guy, setting aside all the other things that he does, that he'll thinks nothing about doing a gig in France, in French, and then in Germany, so that you think, I like to tell funny stories. Would I be able to tell a funny story in French? Just like that? Because also his mind is like, must be just astonishing. You know, he flits from one topic to another, and they all ended up connecting. And he's a fascinating character.
Didn't he run a marathon or marathons in
Marathons,
consecutive?
I think he did some 30 marathons in 30 days.
I've done one, and I was in recovery for about 6 months afterwards. So how he did that many?
I've eaten a marathon, but that was in a long time. All of that side of thing that he does is, and again, it's like, it's a surprise, such a surprising figure insofar as he doesn't look like a bloke who runs marathons.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So we've got Michelle Obama, Jacinda Ardern, Eddie Izzard, and John Clayton.
I'll end up cooking, I think.
And the last one I wanted to ask you is, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time? So what do you think John Clayton will be doing in 2030?
Well, I imagine I'll be retired, because 10 years' time, I know you're not going to believe this, Paul, but I'll be coming up 72.
No, don't believe it.
So I'll be sitting in my garden, strumming my guitar. I hope I'm still playing in the band. Because there's no reason to stop doing that. I've got colleagues at Radio Lancashire who are in their 70s, but I don't know. I'm not sure the industry would need me for another 10 years. I'm not sure whether I need the industry is a different matter. So yeah, I hope I'm still able to offer the kind of advice and guidance through the sort of mentoring thing. But I think sometimes, you know, when you are if you're in your 70s, what advice can I give to a 17-year-old? That'd be an interesting one, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think you've got so many years of experience. Like, going back to when I first met you, I left that meeting with you thinking, oh crap, I'm like nowhere near where I thought I was, because you were asking me questions like, why do you listen to the radio? And I was like, why do I listen to? And then you said it's because you want to connect with them. There's that connection with the audience and the presenter. And I was like, that thought did not even enter my mind. So I think, I think someone like you and someone with your experience will always have a lot to give and a lot of advice to dish out.
Well, I hope so. So yeah, that's me in 10 years' time. I'll be like Paige the Oracle.
I think that's a perfect way to end. Thank you so much, John.
No problem at all. It's lovely to chat with you.